that's the problem, the Constitution. Have we even practiced what is there properly to identify and say, well, look, we've done this and we've discovered that this is a problem? Because largely people say, look, we've not even obeyed half of what is there the way we ought to, yet we say it's a problem.
No, you see, one thing that we must understand, before you can talk about performance, you must look at the structure you are working with. Unless you refine the structure, you're going to have inferior performance.
Give us specifics.
But
what kind of structure?
This is what I was saying about powers, for instance, security, economy, health issues. A lot of that, education, a lot of that should be handled by the states, not so much by federal government as it is now. So when you change that, the chances are governance will be easier to deal with. You know, now you notice that everything that happens in the country is the president. Everybody, everything is the federal government.
Education is not federal government. It's on the concurrent list. Both the states and federal government can work on that. The same thing with power. We understand now that they can generate.
Yes, you know, we said we are going into these things now, and the more we do, the better for us, for governance. Now, everything that happens in Nigeria, notice critics always say president. Everything is the president. That's because he has too much powers, too much responsibility in the federal government. If the states were handling more of these responsibilities, we'll be able to hold them more accountable. You know, it's so difficult now to say the reason I don't have water, the reason I don't have electricity supply, the reason why we have to pay so much for basic medicines in the healthcare system, everybody says it's federal government. Whereas if you had, and you know that your local leadership, your governor, and your local government structure are responsible, then you can easily hold them responsible. It's so difficult to hold the president responsible.
Yeah, but
they can only talk because they don't have direct access.
The thrust of the question is that, I mean, you say so much at the federal level, but that's not what our law recognizes. And the point is, we're not even doing what we have written that we ought to do.
That's what
to the extent that if we do what we've written, what our law stipulates, we may not have this challenge.
Well, first and foremost, that's what the law says, and that's why we are talking now about changing it.
Okay.
But I agree with you. I get your point. I guess the point you're trying to make is that even now, those who have been elected to perform for the people, to produce services, are not doing enough. I guess that's what you mean. Because a governor can make a difference if that governor is truly committed. Okay. And the local governments can make a difference if...
Perhaps I should put it this way. What do you think will change if we have this conference? Because if we have the Constitution and we don't stick with the principles of it, what will change if we go to the conference and come up with something else and expect it to be done and they don't do it?
If you have a structure whereby the states are responsible for their economy, in other words, if they collect revenue properly, if they produce effectively, then they will survive. In other words, they are held responsible.
You say if they collect revenue properly?
Yes, effectively. You notice, don't you know that some states now just wait for the monies they get from the federal government? Now, they don't bother to control, to do anything. They just wait. And when they get the money, what do? They don't even bother to invest in any development within the states. They just spend the money. Some states aggressively collect revenue, and so the internally generated revenue is higher. Some states just
because the law doesn't prevent any of these other states to be as aggressive as the aggressive states.
The law doesn't prevent them, but then the structure doesn't encourage them. That's the point we're making. So because now no state in Nigeria can go bankrupt. You know that, no matter how poorly they perform.
What would this structure be? Would that be that...
True federalism.
Okay.
True federalism whereby certain things such as the military is controlled by the federal government. The military, that's the Navy, Army, the Air Force, not the police. There's a federal police, but then there's the state police. The international affairs is controlled by the federal government. So, but other things such as health, the federal government subsidizes what you produce.
The national conference,
not the other way around, whereby now everything depends on the stipend you get from the federal government.
The proposed national conference,
yes.
you also mentioned that now, getting a sort of picture of what you've just raised up.
Yes.
Is it likely to address some of these issues?
It is definitely going to address these issues. The people who
because it's quite different from Constitutional Conference.
Oh, no. This is not a constitutional conference, but all these semantics really don't help us. What we're looking at is how do we improve governance in the country? And that's what the national confab is about. What the president was saying, however, is that the confab should not be talking about breaking up the country. In other words, some people are saying we want to consider whether we should be a country at all, that this Nigeria should be divided up. Some people would say they want to secede, really. This is what the president is saying will not be part of the discussion. Everything else is part of what we discuss. What do we do in order to improve governance? But you have a point about where we are now. It should not interrupt proper governance, proper performance. If you have a committed governor, you could have proper governance, accountable governance. We have a problem in many states now whereby local governments don't even function because they're just an appendage of the state. They are not held accountable for anything.